So let's face it, you're a US main, you have no interest to ever play RU because why would you? RU is stinky and gross, but you have that one annoying friend that is just nagging at you day after day to play Russia, and you know what? You're finally giving in. You're gonna cave, you're gonna play RU, but now what deck do you bring? This one. And here's why, comrade.
Mr. President, I'm afraid we have a heck of a situation down here.
How bad could it be, Ben?
According to NORAD, we've got Soviet aircraft coming at us from all directions and ground troops pushing up through Mexico. I don't know how they snuck in on us.
You better double check this with NORAD. This doesn't make any sense. I'll call the Kremlin.
Will do.
Da, Premier Romanov here.
What's going on over there, Alex?
Why, Mr. President, whatever do you mean?
You're throwing everything you've got at us, Alex.
Is it done, Yuri?
No, Comrade Premier. It has only begun.
Alright guys, here we are. This is the deck deep dive for Mech Moto. As I have gone through all of my different combinations for RU, I found it very hard as a US main to find a deck that matched, I guess, any playstyle that I developed over on the US side. I mean, you know, from playing US, I always feel like every time I play against an RU team, it's gimmicky as heck. It's just cruise missiles everywhere. It's T-15s, you know, just dropping off engineers and Igla squads. It's like 40 tanks down a highway. And I have played other RU decks and, you know, not adopted that playstyle. But I think I finally found a deck that really, really works so well for somebody that plays a lot of US. Now, you don't have the Sentinel, so tough luck. But everything else you have in this deck really matches the tempo and the pace of a good deck that US can bring with combat recon that is amazing and highly customizable. You have excellent infantry that can counter and protect you in any situation. You have vehicles that are fast and heavily armed to get units around the map very well and offer great fire support. You do have tanks that can form a backbone of defense with APS. You also have ATGM launchers, and you have an amazing support tab with your token helos for transport of supplies and troops. You have one recon. I like to bring at least one helo recon. You have the Ahotnik, which is this amazing kind of combo attack helo with anti-air on top of it. And I think one of the most efficient air tabs in the game. I mean, for $12.75, you have everything included. So that's kind of the overview of the deck. Let's jump right into the recon tab. All right, so this is probably one of my favorite parts of the deck. In general, RU struggles with recon compared to US. So you really get a lot of awesome options here. Now, right off the bat, the Spetsnaz Gru, I think, is one of the must-take kind of backbone units for anyone choosing this spec. I think they come with mechanized. Let's actually, well, whatever. We're looking at this combo, but I bring this out, and I bring all three of them out basically as much as I can. Their CQC loadout does very well against other infantry, and the only time they're gonna lose in CQC is if they go up against like combat engineers or really anything with a small launcher. But if they meet rangers in a forest, if they meet airborne in a forest, they'll usually out-trade them. Let alone if a tank rolls into their neighborhood, it's getting absolutely deleted. They have 6 RPG 28s that do 900 pen. So, and they fire very quickly, like a ripple fire, basically, because they're all shoulder mounted. They're not reloaded rockets. I guess it's a disposable rocket is what I meant to say. Now, there are kind of talks about, well, why don't you bring, you know, the anti-air or the mixed loadout? Unfortunately, with a mixed loadout, 3 rockets is just never enough to kill anything. You can possibly kill like 1 transport with 3 missiles, but with 6 missiles, you're really committing to that anti-tank role, and I mean, they do it so super well. So if you're going up against an enemy that's really not bringing a lot of tanks, then you can possibly not feel like you need to bring these, but chances are you are going up against some kind of armor, and if you want your token anti-tank ambush infantry, these are definitely great for it. And again, they also have stealth and vision, so they are giving you that recon potential, but amazing at that. Now we're looking at another great combat recon force. I try to pair these guys up together, because then now what you're doing is, just notice this RPG 30, it has 4 rockets, but they don't have as much pen as the RPG 28. So even though it is going to get through APS, it's only doing 650 pen. So if you're hitting the front of a tank, it's not going to nearly be as good. But if you have the Spetsnaz Gru shooting at the front and then the Diversanti flanking on the side, then these 4 shots also fired very quickly. That will absolutely delete a tank. I have had engagements where tanks kind of rush into these guys in a forest and they melt so fast. It's pretty incredible. So now they are very expensive, and you can end up spending a ton of points on all these infantry, but they are so super worth it. I try to pair these guys up and spread them out, or just have them collapse on a stack of tanks if I find them. They really work very well together. Again, stealth and good vision, but they are not an anti-infantry squad, so try to primarily save these for vision or for anti-tank. So snipers, very cost-effective sniper team, not something they're going to be engaging other infantry with, and they're also not silenced, so you really kind of never want these guys shooting. But I definitely call all at least 2 of these guys out, but I would try to get all 3 and just spread them out. Again, they're your token 3 stealth, 2000 vision just recon unit, and I love them because they really help you as an RU player get the vision that you need. But yeah, so far my goal in a match is calling all of this out, right? So PRP 5K, I absolutely love this because it's giving you 2400 vision and a laser if you need it, and you know, that 1.25 stealth. It's that very fast, highly agile and mobile recon you know, vehicle that you can put out on a flank somewhere just to make sure you're not getting enveloped, right? No sneaky stuff is getting by you. It's a great option to have for your kit to be able to see things that might be flanking way around the side. Again, not a combat unit in any sense, but very good to be putting on the flanks. And then the Corsair. So many great uses for this. I don't put any kind of armament on it, but you can put a thermobaric or an ATGM if you want to use it as a kind of combat scout. If you think something's in the back lines and you want this to go damaging stuff, you can upgrade it for that. I personally just like it for the sensors. You know, again, if I think something is hiding somewhere in the back line or it's hiding around the flanks, I can use this to fly around, and being 60 points, I don't really care too much if it dies. But let's look at what we didn't bring. So Res Vedka, again, it's just one of those very mediocre squads. Sure, they only cost 50, but I don't feel like they kill anything that they would get into a fight with. And only having 3 RPG 26s at 450 pin just feels so lackluster to me. I mean, this is one of those units that makes a Bradley look good because it just can't really fight back against it very well. So I felt like for what this does, the other units I have just do it in such a superior fashion that I didn't feel like these guys were worth it at all. The BRM 1K, you know, this is again kind of doing that same thing. You can upgrade it with the PRP 4A turret that gives it 2400 range. We have the PRP 5K on the BTR 80 chassis, which goes 100 speed. This thing is 65. So since we have the 5K, this one just does not, it's basically one-upped by the PRP 5K. So the Kozlik, I'm not really wanting to micro this thing around, but it is great at backline rating. It does have a slight stealth rating, and you can either put the recoilless rifle on it or the ATGM. You basically would use this to go and, you know, hunt and snipe backline artillery. But I'm just not the kind of guy that micros, that wants to spend all that time going and microing these things around. But that's what they would be there for, and you know, they could do a pretty good job for it, and especially as cheap as they are, not a bad choice. It's just kind of not my play style. And we already have the Corsair. So you might notice I don't have any transports here in the Recon tab, and that's primarily because I'm just picking them up somewhere else. You get all the great options here. You get the K16 that you can upgrade. You get the BMP3 that you can upgrade. BMP2, I just really never found a practical use for this because, you know, yeah, you can upgrade it to kind of make it more combat effective as fire support with the Coronet. You know, but honestly, again, you up armor this thing, it has 16 health, barely any armor. It just kind of doesn't really fit that well into the playstyle that I have. I know some people love the idea of spamming, you know, these things out, and you just bring out like 50 of them in a line. That's a cool meme. But actually using these practically, the BMP3 does everything it does way better with a little bit more health. So it's, you know, survives basically 1 extra shot versus the BMP2. And the BMP1, well, it's just a worse version of the BMP2. It comes with the Grom instead of the 30 mic, which is a kind of slow firing heat cannon. Again, I'll leave this up to you guys for experimentation, but when I want to bring out a transport, I'm either going to bring out the BMP3, which can get a very nice armament kit on it. I mean, even at just this, you have the 100 mil with the heat and the ATGMs, which has multi-function, and the 30 mil, right? Or you can upgrade it to get the 57, and man, this is a fire support beast. So if I'm going to bring out one of these transports, it's going to be either the BMP3 or the K16 with the boomerang module, right? But again, you get these options here if you want to go and diversify your vehicle loadout, but we get plenty of options in the infantry tab. So let's check out infantry tab. Now this is where the deck really comes alive. I mean, those options we talked about earlier, with the Spetsnaz GRU AT. I mean, they're awesome. They definitely are a mainline for your infantry, but now we have everything that rounds out this kit to make it so super good. So let's look at SSO. I recently watched a video that kind of did a explanation of the squad's roles, but I honestly got to tell you guys, in practice, and I actually also ran a test myself, this loadout sucks. The only time the SSO wins against an equally priced CQC squad is when you guys get into a building with each other and they don't have a flashbang. So for example, like combat engineers versus these guys will lose in a building of about a 2-to-1 ratio. So there'll be about 4 of these models left and the combat engineers will be dead. But in a forest or in building to building fights, these guys lose. And I think the reason, because again, on paper, this looks great, but the damage of the Burr launcher is really bad. At only 6 damage, when this thing is not getting a lot of fire on target, and let's see its reload time, 6 to 8. So I think that reload time is also much longer than, of course, if you're going up against a squad with SMAs. I ran the test. Combat engineers beat these guys in every situation, which again, they're equally cost. I think the combat engineers are like 5 more, but really lackluster in this loadout. So I tested this a lot, never again. Now, the standoff loadout for these guys is incredible. And the main reason is because this Cornet M can fire at infantry targets. So what and this is the only version of this in the game right now. So what you're getting right now is an 1800 meter anti-infantry ATGM that does 15 damage, and that's a lot. Of course, when it hits a building, that's getting reduced, but if you find an infantry unit like crossing a road or out in the open in a forest, whatever, and this Cornet M hits it, it's an instant shock onto the squad, right? So they're going to be running slower, and you're going to at least kill 3 models minimum hitting them with this, right? So also too, if you see like cat tow 2 teams or cat teams or whatever tow teams in a building, you can actually sneak these guys up and have them fire their Cornet M's and do massive damage to those ATGM teams in buildings. Really incredible. The only weakness this has is actually honestly firing at vehicles. So what I tend to do is I tend to actually switch these off until I want them to engage a target, then I turn them back on. But the rest of their kit is also very good. I mean, basically anything 600 meters and closer is taking a lot of damage. The SV98 can ignore 100% of cover, so this one rifle is doing a lot of damage. And of course, they have the 2 PKPs at 10 pen. So I absolutely love these guys. For only 5 more, I feel like you're getting way more versatility out of the SSO versus its CQC loadout, which is just not good. Anyway, RPG 29. So again, it's no Rangers Moz team, but what these guys allow you to do is they allow you to give sustained amounts of damage when you're defending a strong point or when you're attacking. What I've noticed is the Spetsnaz GRU AT, they run out of ammo very quickly, so you end up having to retreat them and reload them quite often. Same with the other guys in the Recon tab. So these guys allow you to have a defensive line that can hold while your Spetsnaz are constantly reloading, right? And again, at 70 cost, these are very, very efficient units that do an absolutely fantastic job at that, again, ranged standoff engagement, giving you, again, kind of a backline of support. I try to bring at least 2 of these out, keep them in pairs, spread them around an objective, and you'll get a great amount of defense. Also, the higher elevation you can get them, they can actually start doing top attack on tanks to get massive damage. So, Sturmoviki, these guys are like, they're great in mass. They're the like iconic Soviet send another wave type infantry. Because at 4 damage, these RPG 7s like are very iconic of the like, what the hell kind of damage is this thing even doing? But the nice thing about this squad is, again, because they're so cheap, you don't mind just sending them in ahead of all of your other very expensive units, right? Your SSO are expensive, your Spetsnaz Gru are expensive, you know, basically every other unit you have in this deck is very expensive. So these guys are kind of your cannon fodder that, again, have RPG 7s. They can do damage to other infantry units, and they can take damage, right? With 7 models, they can, and 10 armor, they can actually be there as basically a damage sponge for your other more high value infantry. So I do like having these out. I usually always bring 2 at the beginning, and again, they're kind of the frontline fodder of my army, and they do that frontline fodder role so well. So Ognamachiki, probably one of like my favorite units that are just absolute wrecking balls. I mean, the problem with them though is they are such glass cannons. At 4 models and 6 armor, you never want to put these guys in a combat scenario by themselves. Preferably, you always want them in a building when they're fighting something, and preferably you want to stack something else, like a Shermoviki squad, with them, so they're not just getting instantly vaporized. But the way that their MROZs work is they have 4 of them, right? So they fire all 4, I think in volleys of 2, and then they have to reload. So between all their shots, they do fire these very quickly, actually much faster than the Green Berets. And to think that Green Beret flash is like 100, these are half the cost, and you get, you know, essentially more rockets to match the cost, and they fire much faster than the flash launcher. So these guys, again, I put them into the building, I fire all of the incendiary rounds out, and then I have them basically run away after that because they're so super fragile. So do bring these guys out. I usually always bring 2 of them out at the beginning of my deployment as well, because whatever infantry your enemy player against you brings, these melt them, right? Absolutely wonderful. Definitely want to be prioritizing having all 4 of these guys out, but they need to be reloaded often. AGS 17. So these guys kind of fill the same role and idea of the RPG 29, that they give you a backbone of defense. So when you're looking to lock down an objective, these guys are great for just sprinkling throughout an objective to give you that anti-infantry suppression and constant amount of damage, you know, when you're defending a point. And again, at 50 points, you really don't care. You just kind of bring them out, spread them around, and you let them live their best life. They do that very well. So PTRK Cornet M. Now this is one of those just absolutely wonderful 1800 meter range, 1200 heat pen ATGM launchers that is just amazing. If the enemy lets one of these slip past and hit him, you're doing like at least 1/3. No, you're doing, if you're in the front, you're doing like 2/3, maybe half of a tank's health with 1 shot. I think against a SEP V3, it takes 3 of these to kill it. But anything besides a SEP V3, I think it's only 2 of these Cornet M's can kill a tank. So again, if you want to lock down an objective, create a defensive space, this PTRK Cornet is a monster. Again, if they let themselves get hit, they're in big trouble, and you get 6 rockets with it, so it actually does have a pretty good amount of sustain. Do not sleep on how powerful this is, and definitely upgrade it. It is so super worth that cost. The lesser upgraded version, it loses 200 meters range and 200 pen and 1 damage, so you're getting a lot for that 20 points. Let's look at the PZRK Igla. I love these guys. 2,000 meter range, which is just obnoxious. 2 launchers and 6 missiles. They are an absolute menace to any helicopter that gets by. When you're locking down an objective, these are the units you want to bring. So you kind of see the flow with this, right? You have your offensive infantry, Spetsnaz Gru, and Diversanti SSO, Sturmovikis, Ognamachikis. They're very good offensive infantry. And then you have your set of defensive infantry, the RPG-29, the AGS, the PTRK Cornet, and the Igla kind of are your backline. And of course you can mix and match. Your Igla can be offensive and kind of roll with you. But these guys are giving you a ton of fire support on an objective, at very long range. Again, 2,000 meters range is very far, and you have 6 missiles, so they're doing that very well. Now let's talk about the BMP-3. So I bring both variants of the BMP-3, just kind of depending on what I need them for. If I need a transport, but I don't want to spend a lot of points, I just want a little bit of fire support. I'm going up against soft targets and a lot of like infantry spam. Yes, I'll bring the BMP-3, just the regular one. It has the cannon and the 30 mil. It kind of has everything you need, and it has an ATGM if it wants to shoot at long range with 600 pen. Again, it's not bad, and for as cheap as it is, you're not hurting very much if it ends up dying. And then I bring a few of the BMP-3Ms, which upgrades its armor, its heat armor, and its health, in addition to the fact that it's now getting a 57, a Cornet, and a Bulat. So this fire support package is very good and can deal a very high amount of damage to, again, anything that comes at you. Between the Cornets and the 57, you are a threat to tanks, and with the Bulat and still the 57, you're very much a threat to infantry, but it does cost considerably more. So if you're going up against, you know, a lot of tanks and helicopters, I wouldn't bring these out because they're just at a risk of dying. But again, you'll know in those urban environments when you can tuck them in somewhere, they're a really great unit to have as fire support. Just try to keep them alive. At 120, you don't want to be throwing these away. So the boomerangs, right? If I'm playing on an urban map, I bring these. If I'm playing on a wide open map like Meandering or Highway of Death, I'm bringing these boomerangs. They're very, very good for basically the niche application that they're fast and they have an 1800 meter Cornet M and they're only 90. Now, why don't I put all of this armor and everything on them? Because I am not bringing this unit in to be a mainline, like, damaging unit. I want this thing to be hidden in tree lines after I drop infantry off, or I just sell it, right? If I don't actually feel like I'm going to take advantage of the 30 mil and the 1800 meter Cornet, I'll just sell it. I think one of the good uses for it is that you can run this thing around in tree lines and try to take basically sniping targets of opportunity at vehicles, or if you find a helicopter flying overhead, that 30 mil will rinse a helicopter. So again, at 90 points too, I'm not going to be crying when this thing dies. I feel like if you upgrade it to, you know, the extra 45 for, you know, 2 extra health, basically no extra armor, and the APS, again, what you're spending, sure, you're getting a little bit of survivability, but in my experience, it's usually not worth the cost. These things are just too lightly skinned, and any vehicle that it goes up against just shreds it, right? So, yeah, anyway, that's kind of how I built it out, and I'd like to have, you know, again, I can get a lot more of them, making them cheaper. So let's look at what I didn't bring. Now, the Moto Pechota and the Motor Strelki, these guys both, they're very lightly skinned 6 armor, and right off the bat for me, when I see something at 6 armor, I'm like, I don't know, man. That thing is gonna die so super fast. And both of these infantry units just felt way too lackluster to me compared to what I had available in my kit. Again, you could probably try to make the argument that, well, the Sturmoviki, you know, what the hell is it good for? Well, it's a standoff anti-infantry unit that has a decent enough kit for going up against other infantry units. This thing cannot do that because at 6 armor, it's getting shredded by any other anti-infantry unit. And if you want to try to take advantage of the SVD and shoot enemies in cover, well, you're spending 65 points to get basically, what, 1 gun and a PKP to fire at infantry? I don't know. I'd rather go with something even cheaper than it, and then you have, you know, 2 RPG-7s and this PKP doing something. So I really found these 2 guys very lackluster and too uninteresting to bring compared to the rest of these options. So the Moto Strelki Igla, it has less range than the other squad, and it's only 10 points less. So I'm like, why would I ever bring, and you're only getting one launcher versus with the PZRK you're getting two and 2,000 meters range. So for me, no brainer, spend 10 extra points and get a much better SHORAD system. PTO Metis. So I do like the idea of having a Metis launcher. Again, it's giving you another variety of ATGM, another layer of defense. And if I really wanted to build like that whole massive network of ATGMs everywhere, if that was like my thing, I guess I would add these guys in there. But I want to be mostly offensive with a defensive capability. And I just feel like these PTRK Hornets do that role so much better. You know, again, I really want to specialize into a very powerful long-range ATGM versus this kind of hybrid ATGM that, you know, again, sure, you're getting an 8-man squad with a mixed loadout, but this is such a weak launcher. I didn't see it as being something more valuable than the Cornet, right? So the PTRK, this is actually almost interesting. I think you can upgrade this to the Factoria, which has the same damage as the PTO with the Metis, right? 559. Okay, this one's actually 2 more damage and it's further range. So I definitely like the idea of this one more than the PTO because its range is further and it's more specialized because you get 2 of these instead of all those other guns. But again, at 550 pen, it's just not that exciting, right? And it is cheap, and I do like that. But if I only had room for 1 ATGM in this deck, and I went with the Cornet. Machine gun squads, that's a meme. Nah. And that's it. So that's basically all of the units that I brought and didn't bring in the infantry tab. These BTR-82s, sure, they're cheaper than the boomerangs. Well, actually, they're more expensive because they come with the 30 mil. I think the boomerang, it's all or nothing. You either get all of that or you don't. I guess, you know, I've seen some people use them. You know, they can give them the AT loadout. They get the Conquer Zem. This is not a bad option, right? If I wanted to have something more fire support, I think only having 2 really isn't enough. I mean, you're gonna fire off these 2, maybe 1 gets through or he smokes and they both miss. At least with this, you're getting 4, right? And if they do hit, the damage is much better. That was kind of my thought process. If I did want to bring this thing in to have a combat capability, I wanted to have a little more punch for the extra 25 versus just only having 2 of these, right? Because they do go the same speed. So I like the K-17 version more. We kind of talked about the BMP-1s. These BTOs, gosh, they're just way too slow. And they do come with this RPO-A, which is not bad. It's a thermobaric at 9 damage, but honestly, these ground transports, when they start getting down to the 65 speed, and the other problem is its range is 600. So this thing gets into anti-tank range for another squad, which means that it very easily can get blown up before it even gets any of its volleys off. So too risky with too little reward there. All right, I think we basically covered everything in the infantry tab. Let's take a look at the vehicle tab. So this vehicle tab I think is really cool. It really gives you everything you need to survive and encounter a variety of situations, right? So right off the rip, you get the T-72 B3M, and I absolutely upgrade this thing to the 9s, right? I think giving it all the upgrade potential is very well worth it. I mean, it needs all the survivability it can get. It does not have as much heat armor as other super heavy tanks. So, and it does have 18 out. Again, it's a very good tank for its cost, right? It's actually, you could say it's only 300. Now its pen is on the lower side for this caliber of tank, but for 300, it's very affordable to bring all 3 of these out. And usually the way that I use them is they're in like my 3rd wave of deployment, depending on what I'm facing. If I'm fighting against a guy that's just armor spam all day, every day, I will start cycling these out. But I also make sure that I have enough long-range AA to try to shoot down any cluster planes because basically
great
at the
airdrop will
elo
be.
that I'm at now, basically every match, even if they just find one tank, they're gonna send in that F-15 Strike Eagle that costs 275, and they're gonna do a cluster run on you. And even if they die, they've paid for themselves because they've killed a 300-point tank with a 275 point plane. So obviously you keep them spread out, but just know that they're a high value target. And I try not to engage infantry with these, you know, even though I think it does come with an HE shell. Yeah, even though it does come with an HE shell, I just find it's not worth it to engage infantry because you're revealing yourself. Hey, here I am, you know, come blast me. Unless they're out in the open. If the infantry unit's out in the open, I'll definitely take a couple of pot shots at it. But infantry in buildings is just not worth it to waste time firing at that. I try to use this to brawl against other tanks. So the Sturm SM, this thing, it's one of those very awesome mixed use ATGM launchers that it can fire at infantry and it can fire at vehicles, and it's an absolute lovely little piece of kit. At 60 points, you can easily call all 4 of them out together. And what I kind of do with these, I kind of rat pack them on an A move. So for example, if you're on like Riga Airport, right, and you're on the A side or you're on the D side, right, you're on either side of the airport, you can have this thing go on an A move from wherever your side of the map is forward and then make a loop back around. So basically you're not having it camp in any one spot. You're having it automatically go forward, just search for targets. If it doesn't find anything, it'll just go in a loop and come back. If it goes out and it finds something, these 4 missiles firing at it are gonna do a ton of damage, and most likely they'll just kill whatever they find, and then like I said, they'll loop back around. And most of the time you can do that loop and get back, and you might lose one. I usually find mine, all 4 of them back at where I started from the in the loop, but maybe 1 or 2 of them are damaged. But again, I really love these because the amount of pen and damage they do is very good for the range that they have and how cheap they are. They're an excellent addition to this kit for long range support. Now the UR-77. Now this thing, I kind of started using these more and more as I fought on those urban maps and jungle maps where, you know, guys like to stuff infantry into one little patch of forest. These absolutely dumpster those. So it's the exact same armament as the Mech or the Assault Breacher, right? That it's doing an insane amount of damage in a very short area. And the nice thing and unique thing about this one is it's only 100 points. The Mech I think is 170. The Assault Breacher's like 200. So having this for basically half the cost is so absolutely worth it. If you guys have never used this, please do use it. Keep in mind though, you got to keep it behind a building or in a forest. It has to be in stealth. Of course, with 800 meters range, it does take some practice knowing where to position it. So as it's firing, you're not getting spotted and then they're just artying you before you even get your shots off. But I try to, what I do is I do a creeping barrage for the full salvo creeping barrage. So basically he'll fire one and then another one behind it. And I've gotten so many skulls to pop up when I use this thing. It's very good. So the only tank I didn't bring is this T-72B1. And honestly, because it kind of falls into that category of like extremely cheap tank that just doesn't do a lot of damage. I do understand kind of the, you know, I don't know, what is it, the play style or the fantasy behind it, that you have this massively cheap tank that you can send a bunch of them out for 170. I mean, in all reality, it's half the cost of the T-72B B3, and you know, with the 375 pen, I mean, it's not awful, and you could sure send, you know, like 2 of them out here or there or whatever. The issue that I ran into is that although I could bring these, you can only bring so few of them. I think you can bring like 2. If you wipe all of these out, you can bring like 2. And I would rather have more versatility in the kit versus just 2 extra tanks, right? The amount of firepower you get with this and this was definitely an upgrade to me versus just a couple extra T-72s that are pretty lackluster. So that's the vehicle tab. Now the support tab, guys. this support tab is deadly and it is mean. So this might be a little bit of a, you know, hot topic here, but I don't bring the Bucks. I just bring two S300s that have this, you know, 4,000 meter range, and I just use the 4,000 meters range because for the extra 50 points, 300 meters range is not worth it. That target has to be spotted for you to take advantage of that extra range, and I just don't think it's worth it for, you know, a 25% cost increase. So definitely bring both of these, and I definitely try to deploy them at all times, right? This is a very effective launcher, and you want to try to bring it as far up as you possibly can. Just be mindful that they will get counter batteried often. So if you're not used to counter battering your long range AA, just make sure after you've fired a couple of shots that you're moving these things around and you're reloading them often. So the 2K Tunguska. Now, honestly, this is one of those units that I've very, very highly considered upgrading them to the Pantsir. But the reason why I've been holding back and I've been keeping it at 2 Tungutskas is because I really, really like when I'm fighting against a US cruise missile spam team that it's like, you know, they bring out the 4 Prowlers and then they bring out, you know, B-52s or B-2s, whatever, with cruise missiles behind it. That these, and obviously if I'm realizing that they're doing that, I am bringing all 4 of these out and I'm keeping them all relatively close to each other so I can shoot all those cruise missiles down, right? It's very important that these things are cheap enough that you can bring all 4 of them out and they're not having as huge of an impact on your economy as if they were Pantsirs, right? That's way more expensive. And again, with their guns and their rockets, they do a very good amount of damage to helicopters. I absolutely love these things. I think they're absolutely a staple unit for this deck combination. But I'll usually bring 2 Tungutskas out. If they're using a lot of cruise missiles, I'll bring another 2. Now the Firegrad. I don't think this guy needs any introduction. I think there's a patch coming out soon, the 1.09, that might change how fire works. But for now, fire is pretty amazing. What it's really best at doing is dislodging enemies from a building. So if you're about to take all that wonderful infantry and go attack an objective, and you know that they have infantry everywhere, but what you do is you go burn out all the buildings, right? Do a creeping barrage one way or another to saturate the entire area in fire, and then move all of your units into the buildings that the enemy units were just in, right? And that really gives you now the upper hand when you're trying to assault that objective and hold it, because the enemies basically had to leave to not die. So there are 2 other options for this. I think the cluster warhead is not a bad choice because this does a lot of rapid cluster damage. And it's not as easily seen as, for example, like the tornado. I mean, you see these rockets flying from a mile away. These you don't. So if you're firing this, let's say you know there's some tanks in a tree line or something, and you fire this, they really won't see it easily unless they have a trained eye. They won't see it easily until they are already getting hit. And with how rapidly these rockets hit, you actually can probably cripple a tank and kill it before he has a chance to drive away. Versus the tornado, where he can see it coming from a mile away and at least start trying to drive out of it if he can guess and kind of see where the arc is landing. So that's an option for this, but personally I like it for the building clear potential. I did try this with high explosive warheads and they were pretty awful. I mean, this ain't no TAS 1 or Buratino or whatever. So definitely worth the upgrade. And again, it's only 225. For a very, very efficient just troll machine. So good. The tornado, this thing is so good. If you realize you're going up against a very heavy arty spam team, what I end up doing is, you know, obviously people move their artillery around, right? Well, guess what? They don't move them around very far. So what I've started doing is, if I know that if I find a static target that I've spotted, you know, I'll bring, again, both of these out, or I'll bring one of them if I'm just trying to shoot AA. But most of the time, if I'm in a deadlock, I'll bring both of these out, and I'll do the smallest barrage, which is, I think, I think it's 4 missiles. So I'll do a 4 missile barrage from both of them, and at a target. No, it's 3 missiles. So you're getting 6 missiles fired in double barrage at a single target, and that's usually enough to kill it. Now, if I'm going after artillery with this, and I know again they're microing the artillery, moving around, I'll usually see where the first artillery shots came from. I'll call these out, and then I'll see where the second artillery shots came from, and now I know where they're going back and forth. Right, so what I'll do is I'll take these, I'll draw a line, I'll do a creeping barrage across that entire area that their artillery is going back and forth. Guys, 9 times out of 10, they are going to be somewhere in that area that you just did, and I'll do the full volley, right? So I'll do the full 12, so it's 24 rockets across an area, and that path will, I've gotten so many kills just by firing again along a creeping barrage line that they get stuck in, or they think, oh, like they'll see the first couple land, oh, that's nowhere near me. But by the time the rest of the salvo gets fired off, I'm right on top of them and I'll get those kills. Again, very good, but one thing to note with either of these artillery, right? If you just call them out, unless you know for a fact that, oh, I'm going to be having to barrage all day, I'll call them out, I'll fire them off, and then I'll sell them. Do not be afraid to just use these when you need them and then sell them, because now we're getting into our next point, and that's supplies. This deck, if it had a weakness, it would be just keeping up enough with your supply demands. Your infantry are going to need a absolute metric ton of supplies. You have a lot of infantry, they do a lot of damage, but they're always on the front line, they're always getting damaged, they're always using up all their rockets, so you constantly have to have supplies out all the time, right? So you end up having all of your Urals usually out, either shuffling damaged infantry back and forth to supply points, or just moving supplies around. So what I end up doing, if I notice I have all 3 of my Urals out, I might actually sell one just to get it back, so if I need to call out another 8,000 supply dump, I can do that. Because again, between your S-300s, your Tungutskas, and if you're bringing out Grads and Tornadoes, you guys know this is so much supply consumption on top of the fact that you have a very heavy infantry deck. So do keep in mind you are going to need a lot of supplies constantly, and if you can drop these 4,000 to 8,000 supply dumps all over your backline, that'll help you a lot. Because if you ever get caught without any supplies, this deck comes to a grinding halt. I think worse than any other deck, right? And we'll get to that in the helicopter tab. But last thing I added here was the Vasilok. The nice thing about this is, of course, you have the automatic mortar. Its range isn't great, and it's not really necessarily a damage machine, but I love it for the smoke. I mean, you can lay down a smoke line with just 2 of these incredibly fast because the way the automatic version of this mortar works. And I think it's a great tool if you do end up having to cross semi-open spaces, you know, with your infantry and you don't want to get caught out by a tank. So great option to just have in your deck. So let's go over some of the things I didn't bring, right? So the Akatsiya, honestly, nothing about this tank seems interesting to me. Maybe you guys can kind of tell me what you like about it, but it's just so lackluster. Sure, it's cheap. It's only 150. You can bring a lot of them. The damage is decent. And it can even engage targets head on. I mean, but at 350 pen, it's not the greatest. But when I look at these stats, I'm just not impressed. You know, I'd rather have my Tornado for big, heavy vehicle cluster barrages, or my Grad for massive anti-infantry barrages. I don't know how the Akatsiya does any of that in a better fashion. So not for me. Now the Tulpan and the Malka, initially I used both of these in this deck, and I didn't actually bring the Tornado at all. I said, you know, this thing has got to be, you know, good enough that it's worth it. But guys, I'm going to show you something here that I didn't really know about until I started playing around with the Tulpan, and I realized, okay, this thing got heavily nerfed. So let's look at this blast radius, 70 meters. Now, if you watched any of the footage from the beta, you would have probably seen that this thing was incredibly powerful and it did an extremely high amount of damage. But then you actually use it and you're like, man, this thing is so weird. It's hit or miss. I'm either like one-shotting stuff or two-shotting stuff because the damage is pretty nice. 18 damage, that's pretty good. But I'm either doing massive amounts of damage or I'm doing nothing. Well, that's because its blast radius is so incredibly small, right? This is a 240 mil, and again, I think this thing just got nerfed. In the blast radius here, 90, so wait a minute, doesn't that seem a little strange that a 152 HE shell has 90 blast radius, but a 240 HE mortar has 70? Kind of strange, right? Even this guy, sure, the blast radius on this is 40, but so you're saying it's less than 2 times its blast radius and it's over 2 times its size. Yeah, no, this was a nerf, and you can clearly tell that this thing got nerfed because it's just not worth it. And if you want to actually bring it and laser guide it, sure, you can actually get some very effective laser guided shots, but it's only 4. So you end up going to be paying 140 times 3 to have him out to do effective damage in very small salvos that you constantly have to reload. So yes, after a lot of playtesting with this, it's just totally not worth it. I get way better results from the Grad and or the Tornado. Now the Malka, the nice thing about this is it does have a decent blast radius at 110, but its fire rate is very slow. You see its reload time is 15 to 18 after 1 shot. And again, being a high explosive shell, I just didn't see it give me the results that I needed. I would fire it at infantry and buildings, and it would just, I mean, it would, if it hits dead on, the damage is good. But if it doesn't, it's just tickling them, even if you have all 3. And even when I know this thing is shooting at me, it's not a threatening thing. I know it takes a long time to aim. There's plenty of time between shots, and I can always get away from it. And I'm not threatened by this at all, and it's not very impressive to use. So honestly think these 2 units need a rework because the way they are now, they're just not very effective. Even though they are very cheap, there's just no point for me to using them. So the Buck M2, I really think when you're looking at this deck, you kind of have to think, okay, do I want Bucks or do I want, you know, like Tungutskas? I think the idea of bringing this Buck either, you know, M2. Oh, so the M2 can one-shot a plane. The M3 cannot. So keep that in mind. You're spending 50 more to get 2 more rockets and a little more range, but you're not getting the same amount of damage. If I were to bring him, I'd probably bring him in the M2 variant. But again, the way I would look at this is either I would replace the Tungutska with this. Of course, now your SHORAD is limited, so you might even take back off a couple Tungutskas and mix in a couple of Bucks. That might not be a bad strategy, right? To have another variant. So it's, you know, 2 of these, and 2 Tungutskas. But that's just not kind of how I built out the deck. But definitely a great option because, again, it is one-shotting other enemy planes. So it is good. There's nothing wrong with it. I just wanted more cruise missile protection with the Tungutska, which, of course, the Buck does it too, but it's just a lot less consistent because you only have 4 rockets, where this is anti-cruise missile mainly comes from the guns, right? So Strela 10M, it's just not as good as the Tungutska, and sure, it's very cheap. I mean, you can make it expensive with the Sosna upgrade, which does give it I mean, this is a very good anti-helicopter platform, but it doesn't have radar, so it doesn't help you against cruise missiles, but you also never have to worry about seed. So if helicopters are really giving you a tough time and you want to, again, maybe take a couple Tungutskas off and add these in, you know, basically primarily use these as anti-seed and anti-cruise missile, you can do that, and then just have 1 or 2 of these purely for anti-helicopter defense. MTLBVM. Now, there was a world when I first kind of fired up this deck that I actually put the autocannons, and I think I had the grenade launcher on it too, and I up-armored it a little bit, and made this thing like a very like punchy troop carrier, right? That I brought in like a bunch of these I think I brought in like 6 of them, and I was using this as my frontline deploy as a troop carrier. Well, I changed it to the Ural for 2 reasons. One, the Ural is a little faster, but 2, I couldn't afford it. Right, when I ended up building out my S-300s and the Tungutskas and the Grads and the Tornadoes, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just can't afford these in my deck, and their combat potential is very limited. Again, it's very cool to have this 1,000 meter fire support with also the grenade launcher. It's a great option, and I think making this fit into a deck that's a lot more frontline focused and you're not going to be doing any support, I think could be cool, because again, it also carries supplies. So, you know, you can bring 8 guys and like, you know, maybe 1,000 supplies, and that it's a very well sustained unit, right? So even putting like your Spetsnaz GRU in here with supplies would be a very mean scouting platform that could do a ton of damage. So it's a great unit. I just couldn't make it fit. The OSA AKM, kind of the same idea as the Sosna, but I honestly like the OSA AKM a little bit better, because now you can intercept cruise missiles, you can shoot down seed missiles, and it technically is a little cheaper, although its range and you know, its range isn't as good as a Sosna. But I definitely like this, and I like this more. The main thing is, since it has a stabilized platform with the upgrade, it can shoot on the move. So great for chasing down helicopters trying to run away. So the Duplo. Now you could say, hey, the Duplo will solve all of your needs for logistics. Sure, it does carry a ton of supplies, but honestly, this thing is so dang slow. It just does not work for me. I need something that's, and I know it's only 25 faster. But for me, what I normally do is I'm calling out helicopters for my supply constantly. I just think the whole idea of this Duplo is just so slow, and it annoys me having to wait for it to come and drop off supplies. So I ended up not going for it. Tachka U, I'm just not a ballistic missile enjoyer. You only get one, you know, either the cluster or the high explosive, but again, you have to build a whole team around ballistic missiles, because you need to do seed runs, you need to keep the seed planes out, you need to time firing these. It takes a lot of coordination to actually get a Tachka strike off, and it's just not worth it for me. So if you guys have some cool Tachka moments, please let me know. But that ain't my flavor of candy. So Ural, it just kind of does everything. The Ural 430 just does everything a little worse than the 532. Sure, it's cheaper, but I like to be able to bring in a lot more guys and a lot more supplies. So Ural 430, basically that same truck with a ZSU on the back. Now you can upgrade this to have Iglas. You can also upgrade it to have the 57, which I think is pretty hilarious. But honestly, at 10 armor, this thing just gets tore up by anything. So it's a little too weak for me. And no radar, obviously, so it doesn't really have the same reach either that you would want. But that's the support tab, guys. Absolutely critical part of your deck. This allows you to be very flexible on just about any map that you're playing on. So the helicopter tab. Now, I love this helicopter tab because it's just enough, and everything fits perfectly with the price point that you have. So these Ahotniks, they're kind of the do-it-all version of the attack helos. It has 30 armor, 15 health, 10 ECM. Very, very excellent attack helo. And the fact that it has Iglas and Attackas mean that you can call both of these out and just be an absolute menace to the enemy team. Like, whatever they got, you can attack it. These S-13s, don't sleep on how strong they are. If you see, for example, like an a Stinger unit in a building, if it's just one, you can launch all these S-13s at it and probably instantly suppress it, meaning their aim time, their reload speed are all much slower, and kill it, right, with the follow-up shots from the guns before it even gets a chance to kill you or fire more than one missile back. So I definitely love the option of having this very armored helo that has a variety of tools in its kit that can do a ton of damage. Now you can specialize it to go more into Iglas or more into Attackas, but since I have a very limited options here, I want something that kind of will do it all. So this is the backbone of all of your supplies. Goodness gracious, don't take these for granted. Don't let them get shot down, and don't deploy them too far to the front. They only carry 4,000, so I'm usually calling them out in pairs, fully loaded with supplies, and I'm either dropping them off together for one 8,000 supply pile, which my Ural will pick up, or I'm dropping them off separately for two 4,000 supply piles that my Urals can move around. So be very, again, I don't ever use these for combat. They have options for combat, and if they ever do get into combat, I think I'd much rather have S8 rockets than the gun pods. But I guess you could say the gun pods can actually shoot at other helos that might be attacking it, like killer eggs, versus these S8 rockets. But for now, I'm bringing the S8 rockets. Outer pylons, you can just add more S8 rockets, but I don't want to pay for that. So I just want it as cheap as possible. I mean, yeah, I think there's an option, maybe, you know, doing gun pods and then adding rockets on it. That could be cool. But yeah, just for kind of how I'm using it, that's actually not a bad idea, honestly. That gives you some helicopter defense, but yeah, then I gotta shave 40 points off. But honestly, I really never use these for combat. They're really never ever engaging in a fight, so that might be something for down the road. So Mi-24K, the reason why I brought this is it has a laser des. It gives you that option for laser des if you need it, but it's also just a good scout helicopter, and at 90 points, you're not sad if it dies. It really gets me that frontline intel that I know what my enemy has. If they have a lot of SHORAD, this thing will tell me because it will get shot down, and if they don't have a lot of SHORAD, this thing will tell me, and I can bring out my Ohotniks. So I really love just the intel that this thing gives you. So look at the Phantom and the Crocodile. The difference between these two is basically one starts out with the autocannon and the other one starts out with, I guess, a worse autocannon. But essentially, these are basically the exact same thing. They carry the same amount of troops, they have the same armor, they have the same ECM. Just the Phantom, you can upgrade it with, you know, anti-air Kokrons, S8s. I really look at both of these helicopters as like a, you know, take some troops with you, drop them in the back line, and then do a raid. And I think that mentality for them could be pretty cool, right? That you have this, like, you know, backline insertion type of helicopter that has some guns on it that can do, you know, can kind of fight in a variety of situations. My problem with it is it just gets so expensive after you put any of these upgrades on it that you're really at a huge risk of just dying. I mean, 210 points plus the infantry can add up super quick, you know. And even again, if you want to upgrade these with some anti-air missiles and, you know, some anti-tanks, 1600 meters range, that's pretty short for what you're really accomplishing here. Again, you can take these off. They're not that expensive, I think, because they knew they weren't very strong. But yeah, these are just, again, very expensive, and they fill a specific role that I didn't want to play with this deck. So I didn't have the extra points to mess around with these kinds of helicopters, even though they might not be bad. They do have 20 armor and 15 health, so not a bad option. Just different play style that's not really for me. So now this air tab, I honestly think this air tab is the icing on the cake. You get the Su-27SM, which I built out for purely air-to-air engagements. Now the R-27ER is a semi-active missile, meaning you can't just fire it and run away. You have to fire it and hold on target, which really does allow you to get a double missile volley. So you basically would be firing both of these missiles off together, which gives you great burst damage potential on an enemy plane. If both of these hit, that thing is absolutely dead. So it kind of gives you that simulated one tap, which is really what you need when you're bringing out an ASF plane, because you only get one. So the main thing in this deck that I really do enjoy are these two guys right here. If you know them and you use them, you love them. If you know them and you don't have them, you hate them, because my gosh, this Su-24M2 has been the bane of my existence as a US player that deploys any tanks, because at 265, it's going to uptrade into whatever it kills, and because it can drop them at low altitude, it's most likely always going to get them off, and it can mostly always get away. It's very fast, and if you just put these 4 RBK 500s and these 2 RBK 250s, this thing is very cheap, and it is absolutely going to kill any tank that you drop these clusters on. Again, you can keep the cost way down by bringing 2 fuel tank options, and this is probably the most efficient cluster bomber in the game, hands down. On the flip side, you have the most efficient seed missile plane in the game. Again, it's less expensive, but not at the same cost ratio as, like, let's say a oh, I know you guys all know what I'm trying to talk about here. The Prowler, right? The Prowler gets 4 seed missiles for 240. This one gets 3 for 220, but it's so much faster, right? It's way faster. It gets the job done much better. And sure, you can put other stuff on it if you wanted, but I don't. I just want this thing for seed runs. And at 220, it has a very low impact on your economy. And again, if you know the enemy has long-range air defense, I'll usually call both of these out and one of my Su-24 M2s, and I'm able to get a cluster run in safely protected by these seed planes. You just have to remember to drop everything to low altitude. Or yeah, don't be like me and getting blasted because I'm leaving stuff loitering at high altitude. That's so bad. But let's look at what the things I didn't bring. Now, you absolutely could bring the MiG-29 instead of the Su-27, but for some reason I feel like the Su-27, the survivability on it is much better, even though the MiG-29 is faster, but the Su-27 has a tighter turn radius, so it does dogfight a little better, and I do like that. But for all intents and purposes, the MiG-29 is a very cheap plane, and you can put the medium range AA on it, and then you can even give it a little bit of short range, so it can engage helicopters and things like that. This is fine, but I think the burst damage you get, again, and the dogfight capability you get with the 27 is better because you're really able to shoot down jets very easily with this kind of 2 missile combo. So the other options we had here, the Su-25T and the Su-25SM, these are great. They are great for close air support. You can put a variety of loadouts on them. You can even give them seed missiles, right? So as they're going in on their airstrike, they have cover of their own seed missile. But guys, there is no way I would ever replace this Su-24. It does what this thing is trying to do so much better and cheaper. So guys, that's it. That's Mech Moto. That is the Stalin's Heroes. I think, again, if you're a US main and you want to get into an RU deck that has, again, great infantry, just enough tanks, a variety of fire support options in the support tab, and again, just the right amount of helos, just the right amount of planes, this is the deck for you. The Recon is also fantastic, and it really allows you to be aggressive and defensive and basically flex for anything your team might need. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. Thanks for stopping by. Love you all. Hope to see you at the tournament that we have. We have tournaments every Tuesday and Saturday. You can join us on the Discord anytime. Link is in the description. We also have the BA League tournament. I'm hoping I get this video out before then. But have a great time, guys, and we'll see you later.